In 1598, a German traveler named Paul Hentzner stood before the Queen of England and noticed something no one at court dared say out loud. Her teeth were black. Elizabeth I, the most powerful woman on earth, had a mouth rotting from the inside out. And the cause was not plague or poison, it was food. Number 14 on this list was so costly that only a monarch could afford to ruin herself with it. Number 3 was eaten purely to show off wealth, one blackened tooth at a time. These 20 foods made Elizabeth the terror of Europe and destroyed her smile. Hit that subscribe button and let us count down the 20 sickening foods Elizabeth I devoured until her teeth turned black. Number 20. Comfits. Long before candy came in wrappers, the Tudor court ate comfits by the fistful. These were tiny seeds, caraway, aniseed, or coriander, coated in layer after layer of hardened sugar. Confectioners spun them in heated copper pans for days, ladling on hot sugar syrup one coat at a time until each seed became a hard little pearl. Elizabeth kept dishes of them beside her at all hours, cracking them between her teeth during meetings, during meals, during mass. Doctors of the age actually recommended them to sweeten the breath and settle the stomach after eating. A pound of the sugar to make them could cost more than a laborer earned in a week. The Queen crunched them like a modern person chews mince. Every crack of that sugar shell was another tiny hammer blow against enamel that would never grow back. Number 19. Marchpane. Before there was marzipan on a wedding cake, there was marchpane on a royal table, and it was the showpiece of every feast. Ground almonds, rose water, and enormous quantities of sugar were pounded into a smooth paste, then shaped into castles, coats of arms, and letters spelling out loyal mottos to the Queen. The finished sculpture was gilded with real gold leaf and dried hard as plaster. Elizabeth adored it, and her cooks competed to build ever more elaborate versions for her delight. A single marchpane could contain 2 or 3 pounds of sugar, an amount that would have fed a poor family for a month. She ate the decorations, gold and all. The almonds were harmless. The sugar packed around them was a slow-acting weapon, and it was aimed straight at her mouth. Number 18. Roasted larks. Here is where a modern American stomach turns. Songbirds were a delicacy on the Tudor table, and larks were among the most prized. Fowlers netted them by the dozen at dawn, plucked them, and threaded them onto spits, sometimes 12 or more on a single skewer. They were roasted whole, bones and all, until the tiny bodies crisped. You ate the entire bird in 2 or 3 bites, crunching through the delicate skeleton, tasting the roasted organs inside. Elizabeth was served these as a light course between heavier dishes. To her court, it was elegance itself, proof that the Queen commanded even the birds of the sky. To us, it looks like eating a mouthful of sparrow. The larks did nothing to her teeth, but they tell you exactly how far removed her table was from anything we would recognize as dinner. Number 17. Gingerbread. Tudor gingerbread was nothing like the soft, spiced cookie of today. It was a dense, chewy brick of breadcrumbs, honey, and later sugar, spiced heavily with ginger, cinnamon, and pepper, then pressed into carved wooden molds and often gilded gold. Elizabeth's cooks are said to have shaped gingerbread into the likenesses of visiting dignitaries, tiny edible portraits she could present as a compliment, then watch the guest eat their own face. The texture was sticky enough to cling to every tooth and pack into every gap. Sugar and honey together coated her mouth in a film that no toothbrush existed to remove. The Tudors cleaned their teeth, when they cleaned them at all, by rubbing them with cloth, soot, or a sugar paste that made the problem worse. Gingerbread was delicious, decorative, and quietly destructive. Number 16. Candied violets. Flowers were not just for looking at in Elizabeth's world, they were dessert. Violets, rose petals, borage blossoms, and cowslips were painted with beaten egg white, dusted in fine sugar, and dried until they turned into crisp, glittering sweets. A dish of them looked like jewels scattered across silver. The Queen ate them by the handful at banquets, the crunch of crystallized sugar giving way to a faint floral perfume. Ladies of the court believed they preserved beauty and freshened the breath. What they actually did was bathe the teeth in pure sugar in its most concentrated, clinging form. A skilled confectioner might spend an entire day preparing a single bowl, and Elizabeth, who could summon anything she wished for them constantly. Beauty on the plate, decay in the mouth. Number 15. Suckets. Suckets were the height of banqueting sophistication, and they came with their own special fork. Thick strips of citrus peel, or roots like sea holly, were boiled again and again in heavier and heavier sugar syrup until they were saturated all the way through, half-candied and glistening. Some were served wet and sticky, others dried firm. They were so laden with syrup that eating one required a two-ended sucket fork, a spear on one side to stab the sticky sweet, a spoon on the other to catch the running syrup. Elizabeth ate them at every great feast. Each piece was essentially fruit rind that had been transformed into a sugar delivery system. The peel underneath was almost an afterthought. The real substance was the syrup soaked into every fiber, and it went straight to work on a royal smile already under siege. Number 14. Manus Christi. First pattern break. Here is where royal medicine and royal poison became the same thing. Manus Christi, the hand of Christ, was a sugar cordial so precious it was considered a cure for almost any illness. Confectioners boiled sugar to a hard crack, then folded in rosewater, powdered pearls, and flakes of real gold. The mixture was poured out and set into small lozenges that shimmered with actual precious metal. Physicians prescribed them to Elizabeth for fatigue, for melancholy, for a weak heart. She was told that eating gold and pearls dissolved in sugar would restore her royal strength. So the more tired the queen felt, the more sugar her doctors handed her, wrapped in the language of healing. It was a perfect trap. The medicine that was supposed to keep her strong was rotting the teeth right out of her head, and every learned man at court called it treatment. Number 13. Peacock. For a truly grand feast, no roasted chicken would do. The kitchens brought out a peacock, and they brought it out theatrically. The bird was carefully skinned with its feathers intact, roasted, and then reassembled, the glittering feathered skin draped back over the cooked meat so it appeared to strut across the table alive. Sometimes its beak was gilded, and a wick was set in its mouth so it seemed to breathe fire. Elizabeth's guests gasped, then carved into it. The meat itself was famously tough, dry, and disappointing, closer to old game bird than anything tender. Nobody ate peacock because it tasted good. They ate it because it announced, without a single word, that this was a table of unimaginable power. The queen presided over these spectacles for decades. Flavor was never the point. Dominance was. Number 12. Sugar subtleties. A subtlety was a sculpture you could eat, and at Elizabeth's court they reached absurd heights. Confectioners built entire scenes out of hardened sugar paste, ships in full sail, palaces with towers, gardens with sugar trees, even portraits of the queen herself, all edible, all made almost entirely of sugar. These centerpieces were carried out between courses to stunned applause, then broken apart and devoured. A single grand subtlety could swallow a fortune in sugar alone. To build one was to burn money in the most delicious way imaginable, and that was exactly the message. Elizabeth used them to impress foreign ambassadors, letting them understand that England could afford to sculpt art out of the most expensive ingredient in Europe and then simply eat it. The teeth that crunched through those sugar towers paid the price for the performance. Number 11. Hippocras. Hippocras was red or white wine steeped with cinnamon, ginger, cloves, and grains of paradise, then sweetened heavily with sugar and strained through a cloth bag until it ran clear and spiced. It was served at the end of great meals alongside the sugary banqueting course, a warm, aromatic drink meant to aid digestion. The queen drank it regularly. Every cup bathed her already suffering teeth in sweetened, acidic wine, a combination that softens enamel and feeds decay at the same time. The Tudors genuinely believed the spices made it healthful. In reality, Hippocras was one more river of sugar flowing through a court that already drowned in it. The wine loosened tongues, the spice warmed the blood, and the sugar quietly finished what the comfits and suckets had started. Number 10. Lamprey. Now we return to the truly sickening. The lamprey is an eel-like fish with a round, jawless mouth ringed by rows of rasping teeth, a creature that feeds by latching onto other fish and drinking their blood. And it was a Tudor delicacy. Cooks would kill the lamprey by drowning it in its own blood, which was then reserved and used to make a thick, dark sauce for the flesh. The result was rich, oily, and intense, considered a luxury fit for royalty. English kings had feasted on lamprey for centuries, and Elizabeth's kitchens carried the tradition forward. Imagine a blood-sucking parasite, cooked in a sauce made from its own blood, presented as a treat for the most refined palate in England. Her teeth survived this one. It is on the list because it shows just how strong a stomach the Virgin Queen truly had. Number 9. Malmsey and sweet sack. Second pattern break. Here is the part the portraits never show you. Elizabeth did not only eat sugar, she drank it in the form of the sweet, fortified wines that flooded the English court. Malmsey and sack were thick, syrupy, high-alcohol wines imported at enormous cost, prized precisely for their sweetness. The wealthier you were, the sweeter your wine, because sugar in any form was a badge of status. And here is the cruel mechanism nobody at court understood. Sweetness had become the entire language of wealth. To be rich was to eat sweet, drink sweet, and display sweet at every meal. So the most powerful woman in the world was, by the logic of her own status, obligated to consume more sugar than anyone alive. Her rotting mouth was not an accident or a weakness. It was the direct, visible, unavoidable proof of exactly how rich and powerful she was. Number 8. Quince marmalade. The word marmalade in Tudor England did not mean orange spread on toast. It meant a dense, firm paste of quince fruit cooked down with staggering amounts of sugar until it set solid enough to slice with a knife. Elizabeth was fond of it, and it was served in thick, jewel-like slabs at the banqueting course. The quince itself is hard and sour, nearly inedible raw, which meant it needed even more sugar than sweeter fruits to become palatable. A single batch might use equal weights of fruit and sugar. Cut into little squares and dusted with more sugar on top, it looked innocent, almost healthy, fruit after all. But it was closer to solid candy than to anything from an orchard. The Queen ate it believing fruit was doing her good. The fruit was buried under a mountain of exactly what was killing her. Number 7. Sugared almonds. The almond, that harmless nut, became a weapon the moment Tudor confectioners got hold of it. Whole almonds were coated in coat after coat of colored sugar, spun in warmed pans exactly like comfits, until each one was armored in a hard, glossy shell. They came in white, rose, and gold, piled into glittering pyramids on the banqueting table. Elizabeth ate them constantly, and they were handed out at weddings and celebrations as tokens of good fortune, a tradition that survives faintly to this day. But at her table, they were an everyday indulgence, not a special one. Cracking through that thick candy shell to reach the nut inside meant grinding sugar directly against already damaged teeth over and over. The almond was nutrition. The shell around it was the same slow poison as everything else. And the Queen, who could have anything, chose the shell every time. Number 6. Swan. Roasted swan was a dish reserved almost entirely for royalty, because the birds themselves largely belonged to the crown. To serve swan was to declare that you dined the way monarchs dined. Like the peacock, the swan was often reassembled in its feathers after cooking, its neck wired upright, its beak gilded, so it seemed to glide across the table in full splendor. The meat was dark, tough, and greasy, tasting strongly of the fish and weeds the bird ate in life, closer to liver than to poultry. Guests praised it lavishly and struggled to chew it. Elizabeth kept swan on her feast menus because the point was never the eating. The point was that the ordinary people of England could be hanged for killing one of these birds, while she could have a whole flock roasted for a single afternoon's amusement. Number 5. Wafers. Third pattern break. Something the history books rush past. Wafers were thin, crisp biscuits pressed between hot decorated irons, flavored with sugar, rosewater, and spice, and served at the very end of the meal with the sweet wine. They seem trivial, a light little afterthought, but they reveal the deepest truth about Elizabeth's whole diet. The Tudors sincerely believed that ending a meal with sweets, wafers, comfits, suckets, and sugared spices actually helped digestion and sealed the stomach against illness. Their entire medical system told them that more sugar at the end of a heavy meal was healthy. So the sweet course was not a treat they occasionally allowed themselves. It was a prescription they followed at nearly every meal, on doctor's orders, for their own good. Elizabeth was not indulging against advice. She was obeying it. Her physicians handed her the very thing dissolving her teeth and called it care. Number 4. Candied ginger. Fourth pattern break. Ginger root, fiery and medicinal, was one of the most respected substances in the Tudor pantry, believed to ward off plague itself, and the court took that good root and drowned it in sugar. Fresh ginger was boiled soft, then simmered through rising strengths of sugar syrup and dried into sticky, translucent, blazing sweet pieces. Elizabeth ate it as both a delicacy and a remedy, chewing candied ginger against colds and stomach trouble the way we might take a lozenge. And here is the terrible irony of her entire diet in a single sweet. The healthiest ingredient in the room, the anti-plague wonder root, was made worthless the instant it was preserved, because the sugar preserving it was the actual danger. She reached for ginger to protect her health and got a mouthful of decay instead. Nearly everything on her table worked this way. The cure and the poison were forever the same spoonful. Number 3. Sugar plate. Sugar plate was pure sugar pretending to be something else, and it was the ultimate flex of Elizabeth's court. Confectioners mixed fine sugar with gum and rosewater into a moldable dough, then shaped and colored it to imitate other foods entirely. Fake bacon, fake eggs, fake nuts, fake playing cards, all made of nothing but painted sugar. Guests would reach for what looked like ordinary food and bite into solid candy. The Queen delighted in these tricks, tables laid with an entire fake banquet that was secretly 100% sugar. There is no clearer statement of the age. Sugar had become so central to status that the wealthy sculpted it into copies of real food just to prove they could waste it. Elizabeth ate her way through these edible illusions, and every convincing little forgery was one more direct hit of raw sugar on a smile already gone to ruin. Number 2. Preserved and stewed fruits. Fresh fruit made the Tudors nervous. Raw apples, plums, and cherries were widely believed to breed disease and rot the guts, so almost all fruit at Elizabeth's table was cooked down, stewed, or preserved, which in practice meant boiled with heavy sugar until safe. Damsons, cherries, pears, and berries were transformed into thick, syrup-soaked conserves stored in pots and served in glistening spoonfuls year-round. The Queen ate them believing she was avoiding the dangers of raw fruit. What she was actually doing was trading a mild imagined risk for a certain one. Every spoonful of preserved fruit carried nearly as much sugar as fruit. She consumed these conserves through every season, at nearly every meal, convinced the whole time that she was being careful with her health. The caution itself was the trap. Even her fear of sickness pushed more sugar into her mouth. Number 1. Sugar itself. At the very top of the list is the thing that made every other entry deadly. In Elizabeth's England, refined white sugar was newly arriving from distant plantations in staggering, expensive quantities, and it was treated as the greatest luxury on earth, a spice, a medicine, and a status symbol all at once. It went into the wine, over the meat, through the sauces, into the medicine, and onto nearly every dish that reached the Queen. She reportedly loved it so much she would eat it in almost undisguised form, and the wealthy of her court sometimes carried lumps of it to nibble openly as a display of riches. This is the food that turned her teeth black. Not disease, not age, not poison from an enemy. Just sugar, in the mouth of a woman rich enough to have as much of it as she wanted, for as long as she lived. Paul Hentzner saw the result in 1598 and wrote it down for history. The most powerful smile in the world had been eaten away by the one thing money could buy without limit. Here is my challenge. Look at the sweets in your own kitchen this week and think about what they cost her. The comfits, the marchpane, the candied ginger, the preserved fruit. Then tell me in the comments which of these 20 foods you would actually be brave enough to try. I want to know if the lamprey scares more of you than the swan, and whether anyone would dare eat a peacock still wearing its feathers. Because Elizabeth I ruled the most feared court in Europe, and she paid for every ounce of that power one blackened tooth at a time.